I don't want to set the world on fire.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
Brothers and sisters, today I'm going to introduce you to the government's plan, or at least summarize it, of what their continuity of government is and how it's going to relate to our responsibility. The United States Federal Government Continuity of Operations, or COOP, is a United States federal government initiative required by U.S. Presidential Policy Directive 40, PPD-40, to ensure that agencies are able to continue performance of essential functions under a broad range of circumstances. PPD 40 specifies certain requirements for continuity plan development, including the requirement that all federal executive branch departments and agencies develop an integrated, overlapping continuity capability that supports the 8 National Essential Functions, NEFs, described in the document I am reading currently on Wikipedia. So anybody can look this one up. It's basically summarizing their plan, the details of it, the facilities, the ships, the airships, and the communication over infrastructure that they use. Everybody's heard of the DEFCON level for how close we get to a natural disaster, or actually more of a man-made disaster. So they have something called the COGCON. Now what that is that's the continuity of government's readiness condition. And that's from everybody from the president to chief of staff to the other branches of the government included. So to summarize it, COGCON is the United States government readiness level, similar to the DEFCON alert state, tracking the readiness of government in the emergency that's at hand. The system was introduced in National Security Presidential Directive 51, signed by the wonderful George W. Bush on May 4th, 2007, and it can also be found in the 102-page National Continuity Plan. In the event of catastrophic national emergency, a shadow government can be activated to facilitate the execution of essential state functions with the assistance of the emergency relocation groups assigned to each federal agency and to specific structure locations. For example, Raven Rock, otherwise known as Site R, which will act as an alternative military command center in the event of primary command posts are taken offline during an emergency. They have a certain amount of times to do it. So from COGCON 4 all the way to COGCON 1. So basically what it says is when you get to COGCON 2, calls for deployment to a relocation facility within 4 hours notice. So that means they know something's up and it's happening. They're not going to tell us that as civilians. Again, that's not their responsibility. Back in World War II, in the beginning, when the Soviet Union acquired nuclear weapons, we had about an average of 13 hours notice if they deployed a large bomber fleet to come and hit us. When that happened, they set up survival plans and fallout shelters for the civilians, and their focus was not just on the continuity of government, it was the continuity of America in general. So a lot of times it comes down to how many people can we save in large areas. One of the presidents actually designed the national highway infrastructure and the logistics of it to quickly empty cities. It was a really noble plan. With the invention of strategic nuclear weapons like ICBMs and silent submarines that could be just outside your coast, we didn't have 13 hours to bug out and move. We came down to, 30 minutes at most, if we're lucky. So when the logistics tell us we have 30 minutes to do something we were given 13 hours to do, you can't do it. So it came down to how can we save the United States government and the core foundings of it in 30 minutes or less. Well, unfortunately the civilians will have to figure that out for themselves. The government's got their plan, and that's just what it is. It's not evil, it's not hateful towards us, there's just no time to send an alert out and expect that I can get out of the state I'm in, away from the city, in 30 minutes, even on a normal day with light traffic. It's just not going to happen. So with the government having a plan on what to do, we're left to decide what we have to. And there's not many options. We can either put everything in God's hands and cross our fingers, close our eyes, and hope it just misses us. And now we get up and we can wait for the government to come out and give us guidance. Unfortunately, that may be a while. So this falls upon us to, as Americans, do our part. And again, our part is not always to do what we're told, but it's to figure out the problems when they're too hard. So unfortunately, this is put on our shoulders. This now brings us to the continuity of liberty. This is the Prime Directive of the Brotherhood of Steel. It is our responsibility to ensure that we survive together. Because the government can survive, but if we don't, there's no America. We are what makes America. So, Prime Directive of the Brotherhood of Steel is going to be the continuity of liberty. The continuity of liberty is going to be our rough outline, our rough guideline for what we're supposed to do. Number one starts with research. That's on everybody individually. I can't give you all the answers. I don't know what your situation is. I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring or the next day. All I do know is the general idea and consensus. 3 days worth of food, 3 days worth of water. And then you have to decide, given your situation, are you going to stay home or are you going to bug out and relocate? The highest doses of radiation, provided it is a nuclear exchange, you're going to be underground or in your basement for at least 2 days straight before the radiation comes down to non-life-threatening levels. And again, this is all depending on how far away you are from the blast. So that means you're going to need at least 2 to 3 days worth of food and water stored. And that's your number one thing. Again, there's hundreds of preppers out there. You can check out Canadian Prepper. That's one I've been following for a while. He's a little hype about the upcoming things, but generally it's a good start on where to focus on. And then if you're going to relocate, you got to have bug out bags ready. Not bags that you can fill on the time of crisis, but you need to have this stuff ready. You're not looking at spending thousands of dollars to make your bug out bag. You're not looking at thousands of dollars to put in your basement to store. You and your family can prepare for about $100, roughly, with some quick canned essentials and just enough to get through. Alright, so after you're down there for the 72 hours, again, this is all provided it's the biggest scary threat we face right now, which could be nuclear disaster. You're going to want to decide if you're in a good area to stay where you're at, or if you're in a high radiation zone and you're going to have to relocate. Now, vehicles aren't going to work. EMP is a thing. So you're going to have to walk, and you're going to have to decide, where am I walking? Now, in the original government continuity plans they had, which blew my mind when I found this out, park rangers have a responsibility as part of the continuity of government. Before, it was focused only and solely on the government. So, park rangers are there to facilitate in the event of a nuclear catastrophe. Now, we are supposed to assume, or at least hope, that they're not going to waste nuclear warheads hitting a park. That's where you go. And that's going to be the best location. Again, it's not a city infrastructure. They're not military targets. That's going to be your best bet. So, what big local parks do you have? What parks are government funded? That is going to be the direction you're going to want to go in, provided it does get that bad. Now, if any of you have played Fallout, everybody knows the government in that game is evil, and they're reformed into what's called the Enclave. The Enclave is basically the epitome of the most corrupt government you could have, and their whole plan of redirecting and changing everything to fit their pretty genocidal needs. Now, our government is not that. It may seem it, but again, it's not. They've got their own plans. If nuclear war happens, our military will be decimated. Our naval fleets, our air fleets, aside from whatever's up there, it's going to not focus correctly. It's going to be missing large masses of military structure, bases, airfields, all gone and removed. Now, if the government goes underground and they come up, Not all of us are going to be waving the American flag. And you are going to run into people who think they have a better idea. And they're not going to be your friends. That's just the way it is. The government, without having a military, is not going to be able to exert authority or maintain order without that. Enters FEMA. So FEMA is, at least from what I've gathered from doing quite a few years of research, all the way from 2010 up, FEMA most likely will be secure in the bunkers with the government. And that's going to be their armed force when they come out. Yes, they're coming out to help us. But if you're not someone who wants the help and you just want their stuff, they can defend it. And that's the whole point. It's still going to be a crisis when a few months pass and they come out and reestablish government. As a full-blooded American, your job again is to survive and grow. After you make it to the parks, after you're given some form of direction, you're going to work and focus on reestablishing a livelihood, reestablishing and helping everybody out. When the government comes out, they're going to facilitate you. They're going to give you direction. They're not going to put you in concentration camps. They're not going to force you into slave labor. They're not going to rewrite the Constitution. And again, the moment you put that in your mind is the moment you've planned for failure. And we don't plan for failure. We plan for victory. Ad Victoriam.